Welcome to TGIF.
We're going to talk about something today that I don't always like talking about, and it's my driving.
You do get a lot of harassment.
I do. Just ask my kiddos or Tim. I'm not known to be the best driver, and not that I don't do a good job and drive safely. I just don't always see things that are right in front of me. Whether it's an object in the road or whether there's a stop sign, sometimes I miss things like that. But one thing I seem to always hit, and I don't really see it, is...
Takes us to our word of the day, which is potholes. There's a word for the day.
It's like they just jump out at me. And before I know it, I hit it and pulling over to see if I blow out my tire at the same time.
So where is potholes in Scripture? What are we going to do with that today? Well, we were looking at James. James chapter 4, verse 8. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. For James and James' conversation with his listeners, and for us today listening to it, James begins this conversation in chapter 4 to bring light to a very big question. You know, in our lives, we're going to have conflict. And where do these conflicts and disputes come from? And for James, he is unpacking for us how there is a war within us. And that war is, I think sometimes we take it too lightly because we are battling against something that we not always can see or are not always paying attention to. But it's those moments when we have to make decisions or things that make us so mad and get us so angry. And so James goes on to describe for us and how we should see God is that God is always yearning for the Spirit of God to be revealed in our difficult places, our potholes of life. So God's grace is the key to all this. God's grace is always the key to it. And for the humble, they are able to embrace grace in a way that they can find peace. They can find that comfort. And so submit and draw near. Sounds like, okay, how hard should that be? But it is so hard because being humble and submitting to God, we are in this season of preparation right now before Easter. And that whole preparation is really about taking time out, setting time aside, and we've been talking about this on Wednesday evenings. If you haven't been to a part of our Lent study, we encourage you to come. They're all standalone. You know, you just come, or you can join us on Zoom. Love to have you there. But we're really trying to focus on setting time aside to really focus on God and what it means to draw near to God and preparing ourselves for that story that we know, the Easter story.
And when we draw near to God, sometimes we forget, prior to setting that time aside to do that, to what that reveals in our lives. That's where peace and strength and comfort and all of the things that God has promised us, we begin to feel them within our lives, see them in action within our lives, and live them out. And it sounds easy, like we said, but it's not, because those darn potholes jump out and get in the way. You know, life is going along just fine, just smooth. You're just kind of cruising. Things are going great. And then that pothole, and it almost derails you. And in that moment, you kind of have that choice of, okay, how am I going to handle this situation, this unforeseen thing that just jump out. They really do. The potholes jump out. Am I going to go in the ways of the world, or am I going to pause and draw near to God in that moment? Because that might not change the outcome of what you see happening, but it's going to change within you.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that so many times when our world gets turned upside down, we do a couple different things. We're either going to blame the other person, or we're going to argue with the other person, or we're going to find an escape route. And sometimes those escape routes are not healthy escape routes. You know, drugs, alcohol, all those addictions. And so we've got to be careful, because when our world is turned upside down, there is really a choice that you're making. Do I draw near to God, or do I draw near to the world? And the world has some tempting things when you're in a pothole that we use, and so we've got to be very careful. It seems like so many times too that, you know, multiple potholes are coming at you. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed. It's too much. God, why are you putting so much on me? And so many times God's like, I'm not putting this on you. I'm here to walk through you with this and grow you through this. And, it's hard. It's hard to say the least.
There's a sermon illustration I recently read that I thought really shed light on the situation. It's a story of a gravel road leading up to a farmhouse. And after a really bad storm, of course, a large pothole was formed. And before the pothole could be filled, a bird made its way there, laid eggs. And then, of course, the eggs hatched, and now she's got her little family. There was new life that came out of that pothole. And you think about your pothole that you might be going through, this difficult time or this conflict that you're in, and it's your choice of, do I just try to avoid it, ignore it, seek these other things that are not good and not going to help me get through this? Or do I look for where is the new life, the new growth, the new birth within me because I drew near to God in the midst of this, and He got me to this new place, this deeper walk in my faith. And that's what we have to remember, that pothole has purpose.
I think sometimes we think we just got lost in the pothole too.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is God did not promise a Christian walk would be easy. He said, He's very clear that it's going to be difficult. We're in the Easter season. Look at the challenge that Jesus had going to the cross and trying to encourage His disciples and bring people closer to Him so that they could see the Father in heaven. And that's what we are when we're in these potholes, that, the promise said it's going to be hard, but He promised He would not leave us. He will not leave you. His presence, His love, and His peace are the only things that we can fill those holes with in our lives. And it's hard.
Absolutely, because there are going to be rough roads. There are going to be really, really bad road conditions. And often you find if the road condition's bad now and you look ahead, and it might even still look bad when we're on a journey. But we have to remember the purpose that these potholes can have. And we came up with 3. The first being potholes, they'll slow us down. And sometimes God just wants our attention. Not that God caused these things to happen, but He's allowing them to be used to slow us down.
Because we've talked about that. Everything passes through God's hands. It's not like, I didn't see that. Oh, that's a surprise. Nothing is a surprise to God. But what surprises us most, I think, is that God is with us. I think it's like, oh, God, you're here?
So if we just slow down. So that was the first one.
Second one is God uses potholes to grow us and to reveal grace is sufficient. And I think we see that in Paul's letters too, that he has to remind people, and he's reminded of himself that, although he has this thorn in his side and we don't know what that is, he's struggling through a pothole, that he's reminded that grace is sufficient and that you can endure this, although it seems like there is no way I'm going to make it through.
And the third, potholes in life can change your life for a greater purpose. The result might not be what you want, but that greater purpose that God is always working in us to accomplish might not be revealed exactly in the timing you want or how you want, but one day it will all make sense and you'll understand it. So that story of the pothole down that gravel road that all these travelers saw, they were able to witness that small miracle of those birds being hatched and born and coming out chirping and singing out of there. And so I want you to think about a pothole that maybe you've experienced and where you can find that blessing in the midst, that God's presence was there. But who do you know that's going through a situation, their pothole, if you will, that you're able to look for a miracle that might be coming out of that? Or how can you come alongside them and love them with that abundant grace that we've been given, we can turn around and give to them?
It's to remember that what is God putting in that pothole? Filling that pothole with Himself and that grace and that love. So I love that imagery. It's great.
So the question we leave you with, have your potholes brought you closer to God? You might be in one now, dealing with some things now, or maybe in the past, or there's one coming, because road conditions aren't always smooth. We were never promised they would be. But how can you look at it as that opportunity to draw close to God? So we encourage you this week the potholes are going to be there. Just look for where God is working in them and draw near to Him, because with Him,
All things are
It'll
possible.
be smooth sailing if you got him on your side.
Amen.
Have a great week, and we'll see you next time on TGIF.